For cryonics, which is storing the body at a very low temperature in order to maybe in the future revive the body, because medical advancements or medical technology has advanced up to a point where this is actually possible. For this scenario, there are actually 3 different parties these days. Not really parties, but entities or companies or institutions that you could consider as a European. As a European, you basically have the problem that 2 of these companies, institutions, or much more foundations are based in the US and don't really offer good services outside of the US. The first one is the Cryonics Institute, which is basically outsourcing the part of getting your dead corpse, to the Cryonics Institute, to suspended animation, which only operates in the continental USA. Then you have Alcor, which is much more expensive for one, because they don't exclude basically the part where they get you to the organization, and therefore it's more expensive. So Cryonics Institute is basically just the storage, and you have to find the other thing yourself. And Alcor is also a very old company, and they include both in the same package. So if you buy something at Alcor, a long-term storage for yourself, it actually comes with the delivery. The only problem is, again, it's focused on the US. So within the US, there's a certain range where you can actually get basically the own Alcor team, and then they work together with suspended animation again in order to get you there. And outside, you just get a simplified approach. So if you are living within Western Europe, for example, you get, so they state on the website that you get basically a simplified protocol. But the problem with the simplified protocol is, of course, there is a degrade in quality of the body, of the preservation of the body. So the longer you wait actually after death in order to freeze down the body, which is not freezing down the body, because you don't want to freeze the body, you just want to cool the body without actually the water in the body freezing, because this causes damage in basically the cells, because ice crystals are very spiky. So now the idea is that in order to avoid something like a simplified protocol, what you could do is exchange the security of the long-term storage of these 2 foundations, which have existed for over 40 years already, and you exchange it for the third option, which is Tomorrow Biostasis, which now is a European-based company. It's actually the first European-based company, institute, organization that does something like this. The problem with this company is it's very young, and compared to the other 2, it just doesn't hold up in terms of experience, because they actually don't have anybody stored yet. So they have an institute at the European Biostasis Foundation, which is kind of based in Switzerland, and actually the founder, Emil Kenziora, designed the organization. I think there is also another founder, but they designed the organization in a way that basically there is a corporation that handles all the client work, and then there is a foundation, which is basically a non-profit organization, which handles the storage and also kind of just everything that is long-term. They also plan to include, so they also have already a fonds that is basically there in order to get interest from. So in order to explain this, if you are stored at this facility, you have to pay something upfront, and the payment upfront could be scheduled differently. It's the same with these other organizations. So usually it's a life insurance or an upfront payment, or you get another insurance that basically assures the company and pays the payment in case of your death. So now the idea is that the companies take a part of this whole payment, so basically of this money, and invest it in a way that the interest that comes from these investments, from your investments, is then paying for your storage for the rest of time, which is the basic concept, I think, that makes sense, and also these companies think that makes sense. And probably I think it makes sense because I've listened to the founders and CEOs of these companies and also the interviews. Therefore, well, just an add-on. So the nice thing about Tomorrow Biostasis now is that they offer an ambulance, basically, or a standby service within Europe, within Western Europe. They even maybe plan to kind of expand their services all over the world, but currently the plan is not. So now the idea is that within Europe they have currently 2 ambulances, in the future probably 3, so in the near term future probably 3, currently in Amsterdam and in Berlin, and then in the future also an ambulance. It's not really an ambulance, but in also Zurich, so near Zurich, where actually the EBF, so the company's building, not really the company's building, but the EBF's building, the European Biostasis Foundation's building, is located, and also the long-term storage is currently located. So therefore, if you are European, the problem with these 2 US-based services is that you have to kind of organize the whole process of you being cooled down in time and then delivered to one of these organizations kind of on your own. With Alcor, it's better than with Cryogenics, with the Cryogenics Institute, which is also the reason. So again, as I already mentioned, because they outsourced kind of the part of the transportation and also the first processes, because Cryogenics Institute outsources these processes basically to you, they are far cheaper. So basically you can get long-term storage for $30,000, whereas in Alcor you get long-term storage for the brain, basically for $80,000, and or again a life insurance, or the whole body preservation for $200,000. Again, different payment options are available. And now Tomorrow Biostasis just copied this approach. They also state that it costs 200,000 euros, basically for the whole body, and there are also these other options with life insurance, paying with life insurance basically. So what you actually want to get, for example, within Germany, I think is a risk life insurance, but I have to again make sure and actually talk with these people, because I'm currently kind of unsure which life insurance would probably be the best one. Again, now the main benefit is that within Europe you basically didn't have a system before that is completely automated, kind of, where you, up upon your death, are actually fetched and then cooled down and brought to a long-term storage. Because before you had to organize it yourself, kind of. So there are different organizations within European countries, for example, that actually have in the past organized things like these, and also in the future will organize things like these. But the thing is that you actually want to have, I think, a team that is dedicated for this specific purpose. And this is, I think, so Tomorrow Biostasis would, I think, be the best approach to this. If you think about the quality of you that comes out of this long-term storage, there are, I think, two factors. The first one is how well preserved you are when you are arriving at the facility, basically, and then entered into the liquid nitrogen, and then you're basically long-term stored. This is the first part. And the second part is then what happens over time. So what happens over time at the long-term storage, I think these two institutes are probably very good because they're also very experienced. But the other part is they're getting you as high quality as possible to the actual long-term storage is another story. And because now Tomorrow Biostasis is based within Europe, at least for Europeans, that's probably the best option because they have these two ambulances already. So what happens currently is this. So basically you die, then someone notifies this team, they stand by, maybe also already before, and then they come and get you basically, and then they cool you down immediately as soon as possible, currently with the both ambulances, and then they drive you basically to the long-term storage. Before the long-term storage you are cooled down even more for 5 days, at least according to the Cryogenics Institute, if they copied the exact protocols in Tomorrow Biostasis. I'm not completely sure, and I also haven't seen an explanatory video by Tomorrow Biostasis, which also includes this cooling down over 5 days part, but I think the process is fairly similar. And then after the 5 days, you are basically ready to go for long-term storage. So now the idea is that an additional benefit is that Tomorrow Biostasis actually stated, so the founder actually stated in one of his presentations on YouTube, that even if you are outside of the European Union or outside of your normal residence country, that even if you travel, they would get on a plane. Basically, the team would get on a plane and then get you. So if you think about, if you had to organize something like this on your own, so managing all of these things after your legal death, so you're basically not around anymore, then having somebody manage this whole thing, and the somebody has also to be motivated, maybe financially or ethically, because this person actually knew you. But then within basically minutes, you want to have a team that is standing there and is actually cooling you down. So basically, ideally, after 1 or 2 minutes, or maybe instantly after the legal death is declared, you want to have somebody already cooling you down. And you don't want to have somebody that just cools you down with ice without the actual... So it's called a cryoprotectant, which is basically a substance they use in order to replace your blood with this cryoprotectant, because this is basically something that prevents the forming of ice crystals and therefore makes it more possible to preserve your body on a higher level. So now, in summary, if you want, as a European specifically, a basically all-in-one company that manages it all, and they even said in the future that they plan to have also a part where you can actually store your wealth. So it would be very nice if you wake up in the future, let's say in 200 years, and then to have some money and actually to use maybe the compound interest over 200 years to basically accumulate money. So basically, if you invest any significant amount of money today into one of these companies, not one of these companies, but if you invested it in a fund that actually then made it available to you once you were revived in the future, if you invested any significant amount over 200 years with a normal interest rate, even a very conservative interest rate, you would, at least as of today's standards, be considered very rich, which is nice. So therefore, you would come out and you would be rich, another nice thing, if you invest any significant amount of money. But back to the summary. If you're European, I think you have to consider the trade-off of not going with one of these very established companies like Alcor or like the Cryogenics Institute in the US, and so basically you exchange the security of the long-term storage, or a more higher likelihood of security for the long-term storage. In exchange, you exchange it for basically a higher level of preservation, which is available with the medical teams they already have available within Europe, and also just the option of worldwide getting you and cooling you down with this team.